Corner.tv. I'm joined with Dr. Jan Halper, and Juan Savin. And I got to tell you, this to me is an epic get together. This is an epic roundtable because finally, Juanito, what we've been saying forever and ever and ever came from a different person, kind of a third party, to kind of validate what we've always been saying, and a completely different source. So I'm just very thankful for that. I'm really thankful that I was able to bring both of you together for a roundtable. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining me.
Well, it's an honor to be with both of you. Thank you.
Well, and Jan, I apologize. I only have a few minutes because I've got a flight that I had to change to get where I'm supposed to be today. But of course, with the president retruthing your thing over there on Brit TV, that was kind of fun. I'll bet you've got nothing but calls and calls and calls, people wanting to have you on their shows. I've had probably a half dozen people ask if I had a way to get a hold of you so they can get you on their shows. So it's real fun.
Well, one of the problems, I told this to Nino last week, is that a couple of people that have called, I can't stand listening to them. So how am I going to be interviewed by them if I can't stand listening to them? But I'm finding ways to just kind of move it along. And it's been a little overwhelming, I have to admit. But I'm trying to rise to the occasion. Very
cool. Well, one of the things that you had mentioned was, of course, that there was DOD group that was looking at the population and monitoring public opinion and interest in what's going on, which is precisely what happens. It's not so much that they're waiting to do something until public opinion reaches that, but trying to monitor where public opinion is and what additional information might be needed in order to finish the job, if you will, to get, hit the numbers. Yeah, am I saying it correctly? Is that what your perception is also?
Yes, it will definitely. But I have a question for you, because I think 20% are hopeless. At least they need a dramatic event that will eventually crack their armor, but it needs to be like several dramatic events. So I think that there's probably about 60% that are about awake, maybe another 10% that are afraid to say they're awake, and maybe another 10% that are waking up. Charlie doesn't agree with me, by the way, but
let me say it the way that I think is the easiest for people to understand. In order to avoid civil war, you need about 80+%. It's actually a pretty precise number. Below that number, the risk goes up exponentially that you can have some type of an internal conflict in the country that results in a civil war. You can't have that. That is not an option. And so to move soundly enough that, yes, there's going to be civil unrest with some of the things that are coming as we move into a pause phase. But civil unrest and civil war are not the same at all. The second thing is that in doing this, you want to bring all of the public along together so they understand what's happening and why it's happening and why it can only happen this way. And so the problem is a lot of people just want to get it done. They think this is a once and done and over and the whole thing's finished for us. And that's just not an accurate way of saying it. We have, Rome wasn't built in a day. The country has so many issues that have to be resolved before you can move forward again with something resembling a normal societal situation. There's a lot of serious infrastructure problems, politically, corporate-wise, and the capturing of the American system and psyche is so complete, the programming is so complete, that you have to move in a way that everybody's moving together. If you fracture and factionalize the population, It's like people that have huge trauma and they get fractured personalities, and so you get multiple or split personalities. The American public is supposed to move as a person, in sync out across society. There's differences. We all have different functions within the corporate body in the country, but if you fracture it and factionalize it, we become incoherent. We can't function. So part of the monitoring is to observe where there's areas and people that aren't understanding or aren't moving with everybody else, and try to assist them in at least integrating into what has to happen. And then in the course of that understanding, there is a percentage that will not, under any circumstance, agree, and they're just going to
Juanito,
kick their feet, to dig in. Go ahead.
Juanito, can you elaborate on the pause phase? You just went right past that really fast. I just want my audience to catch up on that. The pause phase, as you said, especially during the pause phase. Can you elaborate on that?
Look, with everything that's happening, and I remember talking with folks, high net worth folks that were contributing to a lot of campaigns a year and a half, 2 years ago, and even 3 years ago. And I said, unless for the 2022, I said, unless you fix these core fundamental problems with the way the vote is done, how could any candidate with a straight face ask for support, even into some of the PACs and like that, let alone the small numbers of handouts that support a campaign? If you don't get the vote right, if you don't fix all these vote problems that everybody's saying in the courts, et cetera, that there's no problem here. Look, we haven't had an honest look at the vote in any of these court cases for the most part. The vast majority, people think because there's a lot of cases that just as you mentioned, Jan, that they don't find any problem with the vote. That is completely fraudulent. It's not just misunderstanding. It's a fraud on the American people. There's huge, major problems in the way the vote has been being conducted, in the way that the vote is being promoted. And if you've got people that aren't the ones that the American public voted for taking office, that has consequences, because it means those people are not in sync with what Americans really want. You're seeing a divide in the country because the people that are holding office are not in sync with the psyche, the mindset, the attitudes, the direction that the people that voted want to go. President Trump won in 2020. He would have taken America in a completely different direction. We would not have the threat of a nuclear exchange in Central Europe. We would not have had an attack by us or the stupid ass Brits, as Putin says it was, on the pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, interrupting commerce between Europe and Russia. This separation, this divide that's being promoted. We would not have a border that's completely beyond all sensibilities. And we wouldn't have the drug problem that we have here in America, just as a starter, let alone the wonky stuff that happened in the 2022 election. So the whole point is elections have consequences. The American people will is not being put in place, and they know that. You can lie in their face only so long, and then finally they've had it, it's done. They're not going to put up with it any longer. That's where we're at right now.
Let me just interject here for a second and get both your opinion on this, because I think what's getting ready to happen, what it looks like, and I guess Dr. Jan, you could help me with this. We talked about it before we started recording. Is it looks to me like hospitals are getting ready for another influx of COVID, and it looks like to me like they're getting ready to start this pandemic craze all again. Do you guys both agree with that? Go ahead, Jan.
Well, I think so. We're getting warnings, and they're already stopped. I think in one of the companies, Lionsgate in Hollywood, everyone has had to put masks on. So if they're starting out there on the West Coast with the sheep, it's going to spread. Yes.
Go ahead, Juan.
Well, they're pushing on a string because that's last year's game in a lot of ways. We know, that with military precision, this operation to coax and cajole and to fool the American people and the world into this accidental pandemic idea is completely false. This was engineered, it was planned over decades. This didn't just happen. And with that in mind, we have to understand that we're under attack. When President Trump declared a national emergency on March 13th, 2020, and then followed it up 2 days later by sealing up a strategic command out there at Cheyenne Mountain, he said, because we may have just been attacked, because we may be at war and just not realize it yet. That's a big deal. We were attacked, but we weren't just attacked, say, by China. We were attacked by the cabal, this globalist international cabal who seeks to move America under their authority to enslave us to do their work. This is a big deal. And we're monitoring public attitude to make sure that everybody understands in this military setting that is coming, why it has to be done this way, and also how so many of the business and political personages and groups have cooperated, been coerced to cooperate and do the bidding of this globalista.
That's true. You've helped me understand why I have been assigned to focus on the resistors and to try and get into their head, which I'll tell you is one of the most frustrating things that I've encountered in trying to analyze, but I'm not giving up.
What kind of things have you encountered, Jan? Like what do you see? What is most regular?
Most regular is an unwillingness to entertain any new information, but also the way in which they reject it is they think subjectively, meaning that everything is self-evident. They verify themselves, and as long as the other people, that they associate with, fine. And they look at life as either idealized or how it should be. I've always said, if you had conservatives and liberals at Disneyland, the conservatives would be on Main Street, Frontierland, and Adventureland, and you'd find all the liberals in Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. And that is literally how they live.
Yes.
And so when you're dealing with that, and the only way that you can even create a crack in their armor is to be able to relay to them that you understand where they're coming from. Which is hard.
But the ones that we're most concerned with are the ones that would be violent, correct?
No, I'm concerned about the ones that have a block in their head and don't think.
But if they're not violent, what does it matter? I mean, they're not going to cause any chaos.
Nino. Let me jump in here, Nino. This is important. To have society, you need to have people that work together. You always know that there's going to be a certain component that's in there that's maybe a rabble rouser, but it is a misconception that this is some large number of people. It is a very, very, very tiny sliver. And when they pop up, they can actually be dealt with fairly quickly, both within our policing, if necessary, our military, and the general population. We're not talking 20% of the population going to arms against everybody else. The real number is you got to have 80% of the people,
right?
Plus
but we're not equating.
Or they're working together. Hold on. This I got to get this in there. If of the remaining less than 20%, you'll have a percentage that may be able to be rabble roused into some type of action, but the majority of them, they just stop. They freeze. They don't. They don't know which way to go. The number that actually are a threat, what you're thinking, is much smaller. Go ahead.
Juan, my understanding is that they are making sure that they take the players that fund these activists and rioters out of play so that the source of money to get them and transport them will not be there. What's your take on that?
Well, a lot of it, part of what's so frustrating is you have operations within the U.S. Government
Right.
that and contractors that have been working under the ruse of monitoring inside of these organizations. And I remember, for example, up at the Halper Reservation in Oregon, over half the people that were present were on one government agency or another's payroll. We worked through those numbers, and so they were actually being amped up and rabble-roused from within, but by people on payrolls from various agencies, not just one. And the reality is some of that of what's going on here in the country is similar. We had a very large number in the number of hundreds and hundreds that were present on January 6th that did the mischief to channelize that large crowd into the Capitol as a cover for other things that were going on, and also to control the crowd allegedly from within the crowd. The reality is when the decision is made to move forward, a lot of these people are already very well known. And in fact, even if they spread out to 100 or 150 cities, very quickly they'll fall back to the positions that they believe that they're safe in. And that's only about 14 cities. So when that happens, they will be pretty quickly brought under control. You may, as I said, you may have some civil unrest. You're not going to have civil war because that's not the nature of the American people. Those people that thought you were going to have some kind of a major war inside of America at the Capitol, you had arguably 2 million, but at least 1 million people present on January 6th. Did they go to war in the way that a lot of people thought they were going to? Not on your life. Never happened. They may want to portray it as though that happened, but it did not. So with that in mind,
I'm used to watching you fly private.
I will be in a couple hours.
This is giving me anxiety right now.
Oh yeah. Well, in fact,
do you have a center seat there?
Oh no!
Yeah, no. These ladies are being very kind of putting me in an end seat. And I missed a flight earlier today, so I'm having to race to get whatever I can get. Is what's really going on. So
I get anxiety boarding flights, man. You're giving me anxiety right now. It's crazy. I hate this. Juan, but what about this? What about
we can do a show later from the jet when I get on the jet later on this afternoon.
Yeah, we should catch up there. This is not typical of Juan. I'll say that right now.
Oh,
what about
have me back when he's on the private plane?
Yeah,
that's right. Well, the only thing. Let me say this, Nino.
Right.
It's funny. One of the wealthiest people in the world. We flew together a couple times here. I don't know, 2.5 years ago. And it was so funny because he just rented the whole first class section and we flew in that. He doesn't have a private plane. He doesn't want to fly private. He's got employees that do because he feels safer on the commercial plane.
I can agree with that actually.
And he feels that they're easier to maintain, and he just adjusts his time around that. So well,
Juan, I know time is cutting short here, but
yes.
Are we not equating into the equation here? And I'm sure, Jan, what do you think about this? What about the immigrants? What about the illegal immigrants here and the cartels? I mean, they're going to cause serious problems. Are we not putting that into the equation? I believe there's cells to be activated. Just my opinion.
Well, that is part of it. Jan, I defer to you on some of this, but of course we know that that's part of what's being monitored and their effect into the general population. And if you're looking at the psychology of where the country is at, that's a huge component in whatever analysis that you have to do and convey. Am I saying it correctly?
Yes, and looking at where they have been dropping them regionally in the middle of the night. because are they placed strategically in those 14 cities that Juan just mentioned? So,
well, let me just say this real quick, Jan. I had a meeting last night with folks who were in New Hampshire or in Maine this last weekend, and what happened was that the hotels, he went to catch a hotel overnight. You think in Maine, okay, yeah, he'd be able to find something. He just needed a hotel overnight by the airport. He goes in and the hotel's full. He says, full? There's no cars in the parking lot. How can you be full? No, it looks like there's nobody here. He says, no, this is immigrants, people that brought him from outside the country. Goes to another hotel, same thing. No cars in the parking lot, hotel's full. He was shocked, and he's from central U.S.
So my question is, how are we monitoring
hold on, I got to tell you this, Nino. This is a big deal. I got to tell you this. So then he goes to another hotel where there's a couple cars in the parking lot, but there's carpet out in the driveway, and it's all. He goes in and says, "You got any rooms?" He says, "Oh yeah, I got 2 rooms left," and checks in, talks with the guy. The hotel owner had 2 rooms that were for veterans, and he had been told by the government agency that contracted the hotel 2 months earlier, we want those people out and we want the whole hotel. So there was no other hotels to put him in. They literally gave the vets, and I'm going to try and set up a call where you can talk to this hotel owner. He's a little nervous, but I did vet it. He, when they couldn't find a place, came to an agreement with the vets to buy them tents. The government bought them tents, and they went to a park in the area and stayed in their tents. And they put the immigrants in the hotel because they wanted them all in the hotel.
Disgusting.
Think about that. Just think about that. And that's how many they brought in Maine. So they're not being planted in just 14 cities. They're being spread out all over the place. We will be able to get hold of. Remember, part of the reason for the pause is because we have the new ID law coming in place in May of 2025. All those people getting in here, even if they have passports, will have a very difficult time with the real ID getting on any kind of public
hold on?
transportation.
What's the real ID, Juan? That scares me. Is it a chip?
It's a little bit more complex, but you're going to have everybody their identity verified a couple different ways. It's coming, and
but who's bringing that in? We are the white hats or the black?
That's going all across the world, including here in the U.S. The only thing is that there's a lot of things that get done that the black hats, if you will, started that will get flipped against them. It's like taking on Trump. You're going to get 5 with Michigan indictments and charges against him, and they intended it for evil. But the reality is that's going to flip, and that very methodology is going to open the door for evidence to come into these cases. And oh, by the way, if you can arrest this president, you can arrest 3 others.
Juanito, okay. let me just clarify one thing here. The real ID. I've been scared about this, and I know the digital currency is coming and all this, but what is the real ID? Is it going to have a chip in it?
No, the ID itself, I believe, does have a chip. But actually, we should get somebody on that's a real expert on this. I got a couple
nobody's going to want to have
fantastic.
a chipped license. No one's going to want that. I'm not going to want that.
You got it in your credit card. You think you're not being tracked and monitored. You got it in your phone too.
So they're going to use the immigration problem
because they're closing the door on the aircraft.